Okay, so our next speaker is Dr. Ken Buckle. We're going to show a short video before Dr. Ken comes up and speaks, but I want to introduce Ken prior to that so you guys can kind of put a little history behind what you're going to see on the video. So Dr. Ken Buckle, he's the founder and executive director of Gratia Plena, and he has a booth out here, so anybody that's had an opportunity to talk to him already, that's great. If you have not had an opportunity to talk to him, please stop by and chat with him afterwards. So Ken and his wife are parishioners at St. Teresa's Sugar Land and have been married 35 years with 4 children and 2 grandchildren. Ken is a psychologist and founder and executive director of Gratia Plena, an organization of Catholic counselors offering individual, marital, and family mental and spiritual health services. And I want to interject a little something here before I continue on, is there's a lot of counselors out there that you can go to do family and child and relationship therapy, but there's not many that are Christian-based and Catholic-based organizations. And so this is something that's a little bit special that Dr. Ken has put together. So please take advantage of that. Their work is in keeping with the teachings, values, and traditions of the Catholic Church. Starting in 2012, Gratia Plena, which is Latin phrase for full of grace, now employs 12 counselors working in 5 locations around the Houston area. So again, if you need those kinds of services, it's really refreshing to know that we have one that's Catholic-based that we can go to, that follows our teachings. So without any further discussion, we're going to go ahead and play Ken's video, and then Dr. Ken will come up and talk.
Gratia Plena is a new nonprofit organization designed to reach out to those with mental illness, addictions, or those in spiritual distress.
We felt inspired to offer our services at Gratia Plena from a Catholic perspective because Catholics make up a large portion of the community.
Gratia Plena goes out into the community and reaches out to folks to help them restore their relationships in addition to the work that we do in the office.
Many of the people that seek our services find great comfort in knowing that we speak the same spiritual language.
At Gratia Plena, we believe that God created us to be unified in love.
One of the problems in mental health treatment is that most of those people who need help are not getting it. Money and insurance problems are a big factor. Here at Gratia Plena, we offer a sliding fee scale so we can help everyone. We have never turned anyone away for financial reasons, and this makes us unique from other organizations.
We desperately need funding to expand and offer more services. We encourage you to prayerfully consider being a regular monthly donor in support of the good work that we do here at Gratia Plena. Check our website for more information about Gratia Plena, and there you will also find a place to make your donation. Thank you, and may God bless you.
Okay, thank you. Is this on? Can you hear me okay? That video is from about 5 years ago. We entered into a competition to try to secure some funding, and they said you have to develop a professional 90-second video in order to compete for the prize. And so we put that together, and when Marcus asked me, do you have a video we can show before you speak? That's the only one I had. So we probably need to update that at some point. It's a pleasure to be here with you today amidst all these really great speakers, and really a fantastic topic for us to focus on, recovery and renewal and restoration. This is really so important and so timely. It's great fun for me to be back in this room also. I heard somebody else mention that. This is the first place where my wife and I went to a dance together. so many years ago. I had met this beautiful Latina. She was a high school cheerleader. I was a nobody in high school. One of her girlfriends said that when we were in the first place at the same time, that she picked me out and she said, I'm gonna marry that guy. And her girlfriend said, why? You haven't even met him. And she said, well, he looks like Jesus. He has long hair and a beard. So she says, we dated and for a while, and she says, my brother's getting married, and there's a wedding reception, a dance at Sylvan Beach Pavilion, so we're gonna go. I said, okay, I don't dance. I said, I don't dance. But she said, come on. So she tried to teach me how to dance the cumbia and all those things. It did not go very well, but she still married me, so. Anyway. So this topic of recovery, I wanna broaden it just a little bit. You know the story of Adam and Eve, and you know the story of what happened to them. They ran into some trouble, right? And I think the human race has been in recovery since then. You could kind of consider that. So in a sense, we're all in recovery, really. As Mattress Max said, there's thousands of people that have mental illness. Actually, in this country, in the United States, there's millions of people suffering from depression and anxiety. There's millions of people suffering from addictions of all types, and so many of us struggling. So, I think it's fair to say we're all in recovery. Now, of course, Jesus came and he saved us, but we continue to struggle some. We continue to have the challenge of temptation in our lives. And so I want to talk about recovery in a little bit of a broader sense with you today. And this is not to take us too far off track from recovery from the hurricane. There's a lot of us still recovering from the hurricane. My parents are both in their 80s. They lost their house to the hurricane. They're still recovering from the hurricane. It's really thousands and thousands of people still suffering from the effects of this hurricane, and I think that's going to continue for quite a while. I think the increase that we've been seeing in mental illness in Houston, people putting their homes back together or finding a new place to live, a new way to live, that's going to continue for some time. We studied Hurricane Katrina very carefully as psychologists in New Orleans, and we found that the rates of mental illness went up high for years and eventually came back down to more of a usual level. And so I think we can expect that to happen in our area as well. I want to talk a little bit about my recovery story. I've told this story in great detail a lot of times, but never in a setting like this. So this is a little bit different from me, and I'll have to scale it back in the face of time to save time. But my challenges began at age 11 when my family took a summer vacation trip up to East Texas to visit a relative. And my sister and I were put in this kind of downstairs room. It's like a guest bedroom. And in that bedroom, there happened to be a Playboy magazine collection stacked on all of these shelves, years and years of these magazines. This was, of course, long before the internet. But I picked up one. My sister was there standing next to me, picked up one, looked at it quickly, put it back on the shelf. I was raised Catholic. My mother's a Sicilian American, so you can imagine what kind of Catholic upbringing I had. I knew right from wrong. There's no doubt about that. But I was drawn back to those magazines during that visit and looked at quite a few of them during that visit. And I took some centerfolds out, stuck them in my suitcase to take back to Houston. And on the way back to Houston, my mother, sitting in the front seat, said, I know you were looking at those magazines, and she proceeded to talk to me about that like a good mother. And I was filled with shame and fear, and I was thinking in the back of my mind, I got those centerfolds in my suitcase, and so it was a long trip back to Houston. Eventually I threw those centerfolds out, but something had really changed in my brain as a result of looking at all of that material over the weekend. And I hadn't realized what had happened to my brain, but it had. So since that time, all through my teenage years, went through lots of cycles back and forth, swearing off of pornography, saying I'm not ever going to mess with it again, falling back into it, back out of it, tons of shame, tons of guilt, setting stop dates. New Year's I'm going to stop, I'll stop on my birthday, promises to God, all kinds of, made my own ceremonies of swearing off, but none of that really worked, and that went on for years. In my teenage years, I also started drinking early, about age 14, and started smoking pot early, about age 14. And so my teenage years were filled with escape, running away, escaping, trying to numb the pain. It only worked temporarily. It never worked very well. And I think of the story of Jesus encountering the woman at the well in the scriptures. And he says to you, he says to her, I can give you the water that will satisfy the water that you're accustomed to getting from this well. You have to keep coming back. You're always going to be thirsty. And for me, that was the effect of all of this self-medication. I was always having to come back. So as I went through my teenage years, eventually got married, I stopped smoking pot, but the other things continued, and I thought and hoped that as soon as I got married, the pornography issue would cease to be a problem. And I've met hundreds of men who have told me that they had that same fantasy, that they thought marriage would fix their porn and masturbation problem. But it didn't, of course. It never does. And so I carried that into my marriage and harmed my wife quite a bit through that process. There were several times where we came close to divorce over these issues with pornography. Eventually, I had to face the facts. I had to look at myself in the mirror and see what I was doing, not only to myself, but to her. I went through psychology graduate school, working on a degree in psychology, probably like many other psychologists, partly to fix myself. If I'm being honest, I have to say that. But I went through all of my graduate school classes and finished, and never really saw what I was experiencing as an addiction. I was also still continuing to drink quite a bit in those days. At one point, I was talking with a priest, and he was a visiting priest to the parish. He wasn't our regular priest. And I had told him about an incident of drinking where I had overdone it, and I had created a scene at the family gathering, very embarrassing. And so he said to me, well, maybe you're an alcoholic. And I thought, oh, okay, Father, yeah, all right, thank you. And I went away from that politely, but I was very angry. I was furious at him. You know, how could he say that? He didn't know me, but the truth was that he knew me very well. And he was right, I just didn't see it. So as I began working just coming out of graduate school as a psychologist, one of the things that I did first in my career was to work with people that had severe mental illness and addictions. And in those days, people that had schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, many of them were also smoking crack cocaine or drinking. It was an awful time. And so I was working with those patients, and it dawned on me, the Holy Spirit just hit me over the head and said, your pornography use is pretty much like what they're doing. And that was hard for me to take in. That was hard for me to accept, because here were these guys that were doing crack and stuff, but I had to recognize that, yes, that was almost the same thing. Many of them were going to 12-step programs, and I just happened to see that there was a 12-step program for sexual issues. And so I said, maybe this is the key, maybe this is the thing, because nothing else had worked. I was feeling pretty hopeless. So I found out where the meeting was, started going to these meetings, and by working through the steps with the help of a sponsor, a mentor, for the first time I found an extended period of freedom from pornography use. It was an amazing miracle in my life, really. The sponsor that I was working with moved away, unfortunately, and I had to find a new person. And it just so happened that I found a guy that I respected in the program. He happened to be not only a recovering sex addict, he was also a recovering alcoholic. And he is also Catholic. And so I said, as I got to know him, I've been drinking a lot. I stopped the porn. I stopped messing with that. That's not been too difficult. But my alcohol has actually increased. And he said, well, Ken, you're an alcoholic too. So you're a sex addict and alcoholic. You're going to have to stop both of those things. So I listened to him, and I trusted him, and he helped me work through both programs. It was just an amazing grace that he was able to do that, and we could connect around our faith and our recovery together. That was over 25 years ago. The freedom that comes from leaving the slavery of those kinds of things is an unbelievable miracle. And I've seen it in so many other people around me since that time, through the years since that time. One of the things that happens when a person finds that freedom is a deep sense of gratitude. And I used to hear that when I was first starting to go through these 12-step programs. I used to hear people say, I'm thankful for my addiction. And because I was just new in the program, I could not understand what they were talking about. Thankful? I'm struggling. I'm holding in by my bare knuckles. How can you possibly say that? But all these years later, I look back and I say, yes, I can understand that. I'm thankful for my affliction. I'm thankful for what happened because it pulled me into a deeper relationship with God. It helped me to have more integrity, more wholeness as a human being, as a Christian. And it gave me a mind to look out to help others, to see what I could do with others. But the 12-step program, if you don't know very much about it, is an intensely spiritual program. It started many years ago because of a failure of a similar program. The program before the 12-step program, Alcoholics Anonymous, was a Christian program that tried to help alcoholics stop drinking through the scriptures and through preaching. And it worked pretty well, but it wasn't terribly successful until the two famous people that started AA found each other and began to help each other. And that became the 12th step of AA, was I'm going to look out for somebody else that needs help and bring them the help that I need. And at that point, the 12-step program was formed and became successful. How awesome, how cool is that? So since I made it through the 12-step program, I've been able to reach out to other addicts, especially men that are struggling with pornography. We run some groups in our offices to deal with that. It is a big issue. You can ask any priest that hears confessions that pornography is an enormous issue. Not just men, by the way. It's also a struggle for many women. About 25% of the people looking at porn are women. If you don't have protection in your house on your home networks, you might want to consider doing that, not only for you, not only for your wife, but for anybody that comes in to your house. It's really important when we see children in our office, we always ask the parents, do you have any protection against pornography on your internet at home? 12-step program was a valuable lesson in my life. Another important part of that program for me was the 11th step. The 11th step says for us to look for God's will in our life and ask for the power and the strength to carry that out. In one part of my career, my wife and I moved to Phoenix, and I took on a healthcare technology job that was very lucrative. I was making a lot of money doing these amazing projects around the country. Some of them were multi-million-dollar projects. They were going very well. But in my personal life and my family life, things were not going well, not because of addiction so much, but other things. And I was really feeling a lot of challenge, and step 11 weighed heavy on my mind. So I began to ask God, what is it that you would have me do if it's not this work that I'm doing right now? What is that? And I began to pray about that. I began to try to be open to what God might be doing in my life, how he might be moving in my life. I started to going to Mass during the week some. I started finding space for quiet time. I started to find some time in adoration so that I could hear the Holy Spirit talk to me. And it happened gradually over time. It wasn't a quick thing. This is something that unfolded over years, and the idea was to begin this organization called Gratia Plena, to be able to reach out to the Catholic community and beyond, to see if we could provide services in a faith-based way. And so I started that in 2012. My wife agreed that it was time to go back to Houston. We moved back to Houston before the house sold in Phoenix, and the house in Phoenix sold 2 days before Christmas, so that was our Christmas present. And then we started up Gratia Plena. It's been a blessing over the past 6 years to be of service to the Catholic community in this area in so many, many different ways. Being able to speak at a conference like this is just one of them. So we have recovery that comes out of suffering, is not an unusual thing at all. I think we're hearing stories about that today. Stories are ways that we transmit our faith. It's our great tradition in our Christian faith, is sharing stories. The Bible is full of great stories. In the Acts of the Apostles, after the resurrection, Peter and John were before the Sanhedrin, the Jewish leaders of the time. and they were being chastised for preaching. And Peter and John said to the Sanhedrin, it's impossible for me to not tell the story. It's impossible for us to keep quiet. And I think what we're talking about and hearing today is the very same thing. The theme through this day is to not keep quiet, to tell the stories, to share our stories with each other, to offer encouragement, to offer strength and hope based on what's happened to us, and to tell people what we used to be like, what happened to us, and what we're like now. On Sunday, August 27th, it had been raining all night. And so I woke up and I got my coffee early. I called my mother. My parents are in their 80s. I called her, even though their house had never flooded in 55 years. I called to check on her. I knew that she got up early in the morning like I did. And she answered right away. And I asked her how the water looked. They live near a creek. And she said it was high, but it was, it's been high before like that. So she said she was okay. And we didn't talk long. I let her go. 10 minutes later, she called back and she said, we're starting to get a little bit of water in the house. I said, okay, Mom. So we hung up, and it dawned on me that from Sugar Land, I probably couldn't get to where they were because they were north of Buffalo Bayou. So I called my sister. My sister lives 15 minutes from them on the other side of the bayou also. And I said, Rose, Mom says they've got water coming in the house. You better get over there. So she jumped in her truck and she called me 10 minutes later. And she was crying. And she said, I couldn't get to the house. She said, I had to park the truck about 4 blocks. And she said, I'm walking through water that's about 4 feet deep. So I said, stay on the phone. I said, I'll talk with you until you get to them. And she was really upset. She got across the street from the house. There is a house across the street that sits up higher. And she said, I'm across the street, but I can't get across the street to their house because probably the water's 10 feet deep in the middle of the street. I said, Rose, you're going to have to swim. You're going to have to swim across the street to get to them. And she was nervous about doing that. Something you need to know about my sister is she has finished the Ironman 3 times. She's the toughest woman I've ever known. So she knows how to swim. So I said, swim across the street. You can do that. She said, okay. So she swam across the street. My parents were trying to gather some things up. She said, look, we just got to get out of here. By that time, a neighbor had been watching. A neighbor saw her. The neighbor came also. And the 4 of them made it to her truck. Thanks be to God, they weren't injured. So a few days later, the first bridge that I could cross from south of the bayou was the 610 Loop Bridge. So I was making the way around, and my sister and I would float little rafts in. We didn't have anything. We floated little rafts in. We put a few things from the house that were valuable to them. We'd float them out. It was very exhausting. I'm sure some of you did this as well. It was exhausting physically and emotionally and mentally. And I could sense, as a psychologist, I could sense the trauma that she and I were both experiencing in doing this. And I know that that's common among many of us through this experience. So one evening that week, I was sitting at the computer. I thought I would look on Facebook to see what people were talking about. And Joe McLean from the Catholic radio station, he posts on Facebook. I know Joe because he had me visit the radio station. He said, "Does anybody need anything?" And I thought that was funny. I laughed, and I thought to myself, man, we could really use a big canoe. But we didn't have any way of getting something like that. So I private messaged Joe, and I said, hey, we could really use a big canoe. And immediately he says, I'm on it. And I'm just like laughing. And I was thinking, where is Joe going to get a canoe? But he's a U.S. Marine, so, you know. So he calls me back and he says, I got a canoe. I'll meet you in the morning. So I said, okay. So I took my son, Michael, and we met Joe. I went to the house while Joe and Michael were getting this canoe down that he borrowed from someplace. And they said, we'll get it together and we'll meet you at the house. So I was at the house about 15 minutes, and I was thinking, what happened to those guys? So all of a sudden, an airboat zooms up, and it's got the canoe balanced on the top, and Michael and Joe are hanging on, and both of them look white as sheets. And I said, what are you guys doing? And so they told me that as they were making their way to the house, the airboat came up and said, there's a family that needs to be rescued in the back of the neighborhood, closer to the bayou, and we can't get to them because there's a fence in the way, that the airboat can't go around the fence. And they said, you have a canoe. If we can take you there, you guys can throw the canoe over and get up to the house. And so Joe was like, yes, adventure, we'll do it, we'll do it. So they went, they unloaded the canoe from the airboat. Unfortunately, there's a sewage treatment plant right by the bayou. And they went through the nastiest water you can imagine to try to get to this family. They threw the boat over. They could only go so far, and the water was so high that it was up in the tree branches. And because of that, they still couldn't get to the house. So they went back to the airboat and then came back to the house. So they told me all of this story, and Joe was such a good friend that day, helping us get things out of the house. Like the main thing that my mother was interested in was the photo albums from so many years that we had put into the attic. And so we brought them out of the attic, put them in Joe's canoe, and made our way. In the time after, when the waters went down, 3 or 4 different groups came to help my parents get the rest of the things out of the house, what's damaged, what was salvageable, and to gut the house. One of those groups was from Adore Ministries, from Project Starfish. You're going to hear about that from Jonathan after lunch today. But the point that I want to make, as I wrap up, the point is what you're hearing over and over again today. Repetition works. When we're trying to coach somebody, you repeat, repeat, repeat. What you're hearing today is that we help each other in our recovery. It's our Christian duty. It's our Christian calling. It's what the 12 apostles did. It's what we've been doing for 2,000 years. We help each other in our recovery. And this is one of the things that enables us to be thankful for our affliction. We're not saved from our affliction. We're saved through our affliction. We don't have freedom from our addictions and our mental illness. We have freedom to do something else. Even in our wounded, broken state, we can help somebody else. We can find something that we can do. How do we do that? We search ourselves. We try to think, what is it that I could do? Is there anything I could do? Some of us can do a lot, some of us can do a little. It doesn't matter. One of the things that blocks us is our fear that because we're broken people, because we're wounded, because we feel shame and despair and hopelessness sometimes, that we think we can't possibly do anything. We think, I don't know what I could do. Who would want me to help anyway? But I promise you, if you look deep inside yourself, if you open yourself up to the Holy Spirit, if you look at your strengths, if you look at your gifts, if you look at your history, God will guide you to something and will make good use of you. Last thing, a few weeks ago, I spoke to a large group of Catholic mothers. It's the St. Anne's Society. You might have heard of the St. Anne's Society. Some of the parishes have them. So this very large group of women of young children. And at the end of my presentation to them, I said, hey, guess what? In a few weeks, I'm speaking at the men's conference. Would you like me to deliver a message to them? So they were kind of stunned. They didn't know what to say for a few seconds. And somebody from the back of the room said, hey, tell them to learn how to read our minds. So then they got serious. They got serious. Here's what they said. Three things. And I swear this is the truth. Came right from their mouths. Number one, they said, man up as a spiritual leader of your family. Man up as a spiritual leader of your family. And what they meant by that was, we're sick and tired of rounding up the family and taking them to the church. We want you to do that. We're sick and tired of praying the rosary at night with our kids while you're in the recliner watching the news. We want you to do that. Man up the spiritual leader. It's a good challenge. Number two, create a sanctuary of safety and trust in our homes. Create a sanctuary. You know what a sanctuary is? Sanctuary, the bird sanctuary, so a place of refuge, a place of safety. They're saying create a place of safety and refuge in our home so that we can feel safe there and the kids can feel safe there. And I think part of what they're talking about is issues like pornography and infidelity. I think part of what they're talking about is anger, violence sometimes, fighting, bickering, maybe discipline that's too harsh with the kids. So it's so interesting how they said this. Create a place of sanctuary and safety in our homes. Amazing. Number three. Here's another good one. Look in the mirror and be of good character and virtue. This is what they said, I swear. Look in the mirror and be men of good character and virtue. And if you're not sure what character and virtues are, look it up and study it, because that's what they want. They want us to be honest, trustworthy, hardworking, kind, loving, merciful. This is what women want. Man up as a spiritual leader of your family. Create a sanctuary of safety and trust in our homes. Look in the mirror and be of good character and virtue. There is hope for recovery, because our God not only has the power to heal, He wants to heal. He has stopped and is waiting for us to come to him. And when we approach him, he asks us with eagerness and mercy and love, what is it that you want me to do for you? What specifically, John, do you want me to do for you? What is it, Jeff, that I can do for you? And we need to tell him. We need to be honest with him. We need to look deep in our hearts and come out with it and tell Jesus what it is. You don't have to do it alone. You can't do it alone. But take courage. Jesus is calling you, and we are here together. You know the song Amazing Grace? Let's finish by singing just the first verse of that, with me, if you will. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see.
Okay, guys, that was amazing. Let's give Ken a round of applause.
But now